Mr. Azmun Ahmad, Chairman of the Association of Muslim Professionals, Mr. Nizam Ismail, Chairman of the Organizing Committee today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. I'm delighted to be here to join the AMP for its third national convention. AMP's roots began in 1990 when 500 Malay professionals organized the first National Convention of Singapore Malay Muslim Professionals. There was an intense discussion and soul-searching on the state of the Malay Muslim community and what the successful members of it should do about this. And then Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Goh Chok Tong spoke to the conference and challenged the participants to do something concrete to help the community instead of confining themselves merely to discussing the issues. There was a intense discussion. The group agreed, and AMP was formed the year later. It had a focused mission to improve the Malay Muslim community's socio-economic performance. And the government supported the AMP in this mission and has supported it since then. It designated the AMP as a self-help group, and over the last 20 plus years, it's provided in total more than $30 million of funding to the AMP for its projects. The AMP has contributed much to the Malay Muslim community. I wasn't here this morning, but I saw the slides which Nizam used, and you have seen the data too, how over the years it has helped more than 250,000 people through its programs. How every month it provides tuition and enrichment classes for 1,300 students through the Mercu Learning Point. How it's assisted low-income families to start home-based businesses to supplement their incomes, whether they're selling kuih muih, whether they're making baju kurung, through the micro-business program. And AMP has worked well with the other Malay Muslim organizations like Mendaki, Jamia, or PPIS. Each one of these organizations serves a niche, and there's some friendly competition among them. It's inevitable, although overall they complement one another. And they come together in various forums, including particularly the CLF, the Community Leaders Forum, which is a valuable platform for the MMOs to address Malay Muslim issues together and holistically. The CLF is funded by Mendaki, and it reflects Mendaki's commitment to work with all groups to uplift the community. And this bottom-up approach, gathering all the activists together, has been effective in identifying and dealing with community issues. AMP participates actively in the CLF, especially in its Youth in Action program, and I hope it will continue to work through the CLF in order to cooperate with other Malay Muslim organizations, rather than establishing new platforms that would duplicate what already exists, such as possibly a different community forum. But thanks to the collective efforts of the government, of the MMOs, and the individuals, the community has progressed together with the nation and together with your fellow Singaporeans across a wide range, as you saw the tables this morning, with higher household incomes, better education performance, larger proportion making it to tertiary education, dropout rates coming down steadily, and dropout rates for primary school come down to 0, and secondary school much better than before. Fewer divorces and minor marriages, and many other statistics. But there are still challenges. For example, drug abuse is still an issue, improved but still a problem. And last year, almost half the drug abusers who were arrested were Malay. Home ownership rates, very high, but compared to where it used to be, the home ownership rates have dropped over the last 10 years. In the bigger flats, in the private property, larger proportions are there because the successful Malays are making it and they've upgraded their lives and their homes. But there's also a larger proportion who are living in rental housing, or some small numbers, even homeless. and that is a reflection of the declining home ownership rates. And it suggests that some of these households are encountering financial difficulties, unable to service their mortgages. Either they were over-ambitious when they bought the house, or after buying the house they ran into some other financial difficulties, or the family ran into some other family problems, broke up, no longer willing to live together. So one house which was enough, one family which used to fit into one house, now this same family has become two and needs to fit into two houses. These are problems which we cannot ignore, but I think we should take a balanced view, and overall I would say the Malay Muslim community has done well. And it has done well and achieved what it has achieved in a meritocratic system through its own efforts, individually, collectively, and also hand in hand with the government, but without any affirmative action. And there are not very many other communities in the world which have made this progress and can say this. I read the AMP Journal, the publication you put together, prepared for this convention. It's a good report. It's well presented. It's thoroughly researched. The slides are clear. The trends are clearly explained and analyzed. And you've pointed out where the community has made the most progress: household incomes, educational attainments, and where there are still problems or there's room for improvement, like the employability of older Malays, or like the proportion who are going to university. One issue which is in the report, and which I'm sure you must have talked about this morning, is the question of absolute versus relative performance. Should you measure yourself from where you are and just compare how you are doing, or should you compare yourself as if it is a competition with the other communities and try and race and catch up or get ahead? It's a long-standing concern. It's not something which has just come up. It's natural that as the Malay Muslim communities progress, so will the other communities in Singapore. And in some areas, the gap is closing, but not in others. The Malay Muslim community started from a lower base. You have more room to go, but at the same time, you have not maxed out. So you started with a small proportion making it through PSLE. Now almost everybody makes it through PSLE. You started with not so many owning houses, now more than before when you started. You began in the job market with very few graduates and professionals. But today, graduates and professionals who are Malay are not so few and are quite visible. So I think there are some areas where you are closing, some areas where the gap is still there. But I think that we can't ignore them, but we should not just focus on the difference between the Malay community and the other communities. Because, first of all, it's a moving target. So if you are measuring how well you are doing, I think you have to see how well you are able to do from where your starting point is. Because if the target moves, it may not be because you did not make progress or you did not do work, but because the circumstances have changed, and the other communities may have done better, may have done worse. Those are things which are not within the Malay Muslim community's control. So it's better to concentrate on doing your best, the best possible you can do for yourself, and aim for steady progress. Make it step by step, year by year. And gradually, from one year to the next, do better, little bit. But from one decade to another, do better dramatically. And I think if you look at the trends, if you look at the charts, you will see that. From one year to the next, small improvements, sometimes down, sometimes even down, sometimes a bit more. But if you look at it on a 10-year basis, I think we can in good conscience say, over 10 years, each decade has been better than the previous one. So overall, the community can take credit for this good result, and so can the AMP, because it focused on the social and economic issues and outcomes, because it identified these as the most important prerequisites for the community to success. And I think this is the right approach and we should keep up the good work. What should you do going ahead? In a new position with a new environment, I think it's timely to have a rethink, to reconsider what your strategies are and your approaches are. And I'd like to suggest 2 priorities for AMP. First, to continue to focus on improving the social economic performance of the community. The key to this is the fundamentals: education, strong families, financial skills. You get those right, everything else will follow. In the job market, in terms of your social economic attainment, in terms of housing, in terms of your leadership. That is what AMP was established for, and that is why the government continues to support and to fund the AMP. The second emphasis I would suggest is to help all segments of the community, from the most successful to those who are most in need. Because we're looking at a pyramid in the Malay Muslim community, and each segment of the pyramid has got different challenges and different needs. And if you only focus at the top, you will ignore the problems of those who are further down. If you only look at the people who are at the bottom, I think you will demoralize yourself and you will fail to notice the good progress which is being made by the people who are much more successful and who are becoming more. So AMP has to take care of the whole pyramid. Tailor your strategies to the different segments and lift the whole community up by pushing up each segment of the pyramid simultaneously. And those who are doing badly, help them to get out of trouble. Those who are doing average, help them to become above average. Those who are doing above average, try and excel. And if you are already doing the best and at the top of the pyramid, then leap up even further. I think that is the correct way for us to continue to make progress. And I'm happy to see that these are the priorities. These priorities are in fact in the AMP's report. For example, you have a lot of discussion on fostering progressive and cohesive families, which are the basis and a basic building block for our stable and for our progressive society. If families are dysfunctional, it leads to many, many problems. You have delinquency, you have underachievement, you have housing wars. Finally, the problem is not the housing, the problem may not even be the finance. The problem is the family failed to work, and because the family is unhappy, everything else went wrong. So it's important to strengthen our families, to enable our youth to achieve their potential, and to maintain social harmony and progress. So too your emphasis on creating a community of inspired learners. I think it's right to raise the aspirations of parents, to encourage students to work harder, to motivate the students and design teaching materials, pedagogy, which fits the culture and the experience of the students. I see you have a slogan, graduates in every family. I read carefully what it meant, and I see you mean, you said, well, we want every family to have a graduate, and by graduate we mean it in a broad sense. Graduate from ITE, graduate from Poly, graduate from university. And I agree with these proposals. I think it's right because this is what we are trying to do nationally too, to provide many paths of success for our students, to adapt our system to the abilities of each student, and to enable each student to do the best that he can for himself. And some will go one way, some will go the other, but each one should do the best they can. So this is a good example of working at all levels of the pyramid. And from the less successful to the most successful, and even for the successful ones to have many different pathways to success. Not just academics, but arts, sports, science, maths, business, many different approaches, because in fact, people are different and you have to fit it to them rather than force fit them into one education system. So that's how we're doing it nationally, and I hope the Malay Muslim community will continue to ride on our national efforts. The third item which I was happy to see in your report was talking about strengthening the community's financial architecture, and in particular, making families more financially resilient. Implicitly, this is something which we have been working on all along, but it's useful to identify it as a separate strategy, because families which run into problems often do so as a result of financial difficulties. And if we can counsel or educate the families on how to manage their income and spending, how to live within their means, how, if possible, to put aside a little bit for a rainy day, how to avoid what sounds good but is really not a good idea, and stay away from people who tell you cheap loans, it comes by SMS, then it will avoid many downstream problems. So the government and the MMOs, including AMP, share these goals and initiatives. We've got government programs, we've got community programs which are targeted at these areas, and I encourage AMP to work with the government and to partner other MMOs so that you can preserve the continuity of the efforts and you can minimize duplication and you can get the maximum value from the work which you put in. The government will continue to support the MMOs in these areas and back them up with national programs. Funds is not the main constraint. We are providing funding to support the efforts, and if necessary, we can find more money. Funds are not the main constraints. The main constraints are the activists, the volunteers, counselors, social workers, teachers, mentors, people who will not only talk about the problems, but go out and do the back-breaking work, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Working with the families, working with the individuals, counseling, tutoring, guiding, encouraging, sometimes putting them right, sometimes, if you know them well enough, gently reprimanding and say, please don't do that, do it this way is better. There is a severe shortage of Malay Muslim activists to do this work. It doesn't mean that all the professionals working on this need to be Malays, but it's easier if we have a good number of Malay Muslims working on this, because then when you're resolving social problems or engaging clients, you're on the same wavelength, you speak the same language. I don't mean Bahasa Melayu, but I mean you have the same reference, you can understand one another without any misunderstanding. There's no sensitivity that, who are you to tell me these things? And the religious context also will help to foster the right change in behavior. So I hope many more successful Malay Muslims will step forward and serve, whether in AMP or in the other MMOs. Not just to tackle problems, but also to be role models for families who still can do with more success models and stories. And this is the best way to build a caring and compassionate society. I noticed there was one other new strategy in the AMP report, and it was entitled Repositioning MMOs into Organizations that Engage a National Inter-Ethnic Issue-Oriented Agenda. I wasn't quite sure what exactly AMP had in mind on this, so I asked, what are you thinking about? And I understand from the explanation that one motivation is that AMP feels that issues which affect the Malay Muslim community, whether it's dysfunctional families, whether it's education, whether it's drugs, cut across all communities in Singapore and are really national issues. And AMP believes they should be addressed by the government as national issues and not just as community issues. And on these issues, AMP would like to contribute to the national discussion and not just be doing their own thing by themselves. And they also explained that AMP had no intention of developing into a platform for racial politics. My view is this. I think on these issues which affect the community, education, drugs, dysfunctional families, social economic uplifting, it makes sense for AMP to share their views more widely and to work with other groups and with the government. Because they have experience, they have expertise, they have something to contribute. And by comparing experiences, pooling resources, coordinating strategies, I think we can all do a much better job of what we're all trying to do. So we've encouraged AMP to work with other self-help groups, Mendaki, as well as CDAC and SINDA and the EA, and to join in the national efforts and get it done together. But I would urge AMP and the other MMOs to have a care if you are venturing into civil society issues which are not primarily to do with the Malay Muslim community. And civil society issues cover a very wide range of concerns and interests. All sorts of things can be to do with the environment, can be to do with animal welfare, can be to do with foreign worker issues. Now, many groups out there, each one with its own passion, with pressing its own priorities, trying to influence society, trying to influence the government. And it is the way civil society is meant to work. But AMP has a mission and a role. And if AMP gets diverted into these matters, then I think it will lose its focus on your primary task, which is to tackle the social and economic issues in the Malay Muslim community and to improve the well-being of the Malay Muslim community. Furthermore, there's one other point which I think is worth remembering and reminding ourselves from time to time. And that is that in Singapore, we have tried very hard not to debate our national issues along ethnic lines. So when we discuss matters that concern us all, we don't do so as Chinese groups with one view, Malay groups with a different view, Indian groups with a third view. And then you try and compromise between the different racial views, which is how it's done in some other countries, not very far away. But in Singapore, we deal with issues and we discuss issues as multiracial groups, each with a different issue perspective. And this happens also in politics, where the successful political parties, you will know, are the ones which are multiracial in their composition and appeal. So Workers' Party is a multiracial party, and they had some success in the last general election. PKMS is an ethnic-based party, and they made no impact whatsoever. And the parties are organized multiracially. They present views which take a multiracial perspective and tend to the moderate middle ground, and I think that's good for Singapore. It's good for the minorities too, because then the minorities have a voice, and then we can all gravitate towards a common understanding, shared identity, and we can all live harmoniously together. The Malay Muslim community has integrated well with Singapore in general and with other communities. It's worked closely in order to enhance mutual trust and racial harmony. It's overcome many challenges together, whether it's 9/11, whether it's JI, whether it's the uplifting of the community through sustained long-term effort. And therefore, Malay Muslims have progressed with other Singaporeans. I think this is a big picture which we must not neglect when we focus on individual issues, when we focus on problems, or indeed when we focus on specific, exciting success stories. Look at the overall picture of Singapore integrated, harmonious, progressing to the best of our ability, and in reality to a very considerable extent together. This is what we have been able to do, and AMP has made important contributions to this effort and to the community, so I hope you will maintain your focus and keep up your good work. The government looks forward to continue cooperating with AMP and with the other MMOs to uplift the Malay Muslim community, and we will continue to do this. And the more successful they are, the more gratified we will be. So I look forward to hearing your views and your ideas and to having a fruitful exchange with you. Thank you very much.